Got it. We are live. Look at that. Okay. Good Tavach, Shavua Tov. A good week to one and all. I hope your week is starting off well, and we hope to add to that. We hope to add to that. So we all know that it's better to give than to receive, or we all feel that. We all want to be the givers. Why? Why do you want to be the giver? Think about that for a moment. Probably because it feels better, right? Feels better to give than to take, right? Which is natural. It's human. And listen, if it feels good to give already, then why not get the full-fledged, feeling out of it? In other words, gain the most I can and feeling good about giving. So, today, because of social media, boy, could you take this to the nth degree, right? And you could be out on the street and there's a panhandler there, and you give some money, take a picture of it, put it on social media. So not only do you feel good, but now everybody's patting on your back on, oh, such a kind, good person, and you're giving. So now, of course, we know to give ultimately is the best thing. But today, let's learn about a deeper and a more profound way about and how to give. So a lot of this week's Torah portion, Parsha's Emor, details the offerings during the holidays. So the bulls that are offered on Sukkot and the many sheep on Rosh Hashanah. And after detailing some of the specific sacrifices that were offered for Shavuos, namely the sin offering and the peace offering and other bread offerings, before moving on to the sacrifices that will be the next holiday, which is biblically Rosh Hashanah, the Torah interrupts the narrative flow and presents seemingly an unrelated mitzvah. What is that mitzvah? So let's bring it up on the screen over here. There we go. Oh, in this week's Parsha, then it brings up and it says, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not completely remove the corner of your field during your harvesting, and you shall not gather up the gleanings of your harvest. Rather, you shall leave these for the poor person and for the stranger. I am the Lord, your God. So the Rambam details, we're learning Rambam, and early on in the learning of the Rambam, he detailed the parameters of this mitzvah. So text number 2, the Mishnah Torah, which, by the way, in I think it's 11 days, we will have finished the entire Mishnah Torah that we do every day. So text number 2. When a person harvests their field, they should not harvest the entire field. Instead, they should leave a small portion, less than 2%, of the standing grain at the end of the field, as the verse says. Do not completely remove the grain in the corners of your field when reaping. This is called peya, like payas, right? Payas means the corner, right? The corner hair that grows. You're supposed to leave it on your head. Guess where else you're supposed to leave it? on your field. The corners of your field, they should be left there for the poor. So they'll remove the grain, the corners of your field when reaping. This prohibition applies to the one who reaps and the one who uproots. The grain left standing is referred to as payah. Oh, that's it, right? Similarly, with regard to leket, that's another mitzvah. What is that? When one harvests or binds sheaves, they should not gather the stalks that fall during the harvest. Instead, leave them for the poor. So if you have like some stalks, not a major amount, but one or two stalks that fall during the harvest, leave them for the poor, as is stated. You shall not gather the gleanings of the harvest. Similarly, it says if a person is binding sheaves of wheat into bundles and forgets one bundle. So here it dropped off, right? It was the first one called leket. But now, if you forgot, they don't go back and take it, right? Why? You got to leave it for the poor. So the question is, this is an unrelated mitzvah that seems to be sandwiched between all of the temple service and the sacrifices in temple service. It seems to be like an awkward juxtaposition. So Rashi, right, bothered by this question, what is the unrelated mitzvah doing here? And Rashi says the following. Rab Avdimi taught in the name of Rav Yosef, the Torah placed the mitzvahs of leket, shicha, and payah in the middle of the discussion of the temple services to teach that fulfilling these mitzvahs properly is equivalent to building the temple and offering sacrifices. Now, what are these mitzvahs? These mitzvahs go under the category of what's called matnas inim, the gifts to the poor. And what is it saying here? What is Rashi saying? That this is an equivalent to the temple service. The truth is, we find that all acts of charity and kindness have the same effect. The Medrash echoes this idea that kindness, acts of loving kindness, is a substitute for the sacrifices in the temple. Text number 4 from the Medrash. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Who's Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? We've mentioned him many times in different teachings. He was the leader of the Jewish people in Jerusalem during its destruction. He's the one who asked Vespasian to give Yavne for a place for the sages where Torah can proliferate, and ultimately it was destroyed, the Jerusalem. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was traveling from Jerusalem together with Rabbi Yeshua when they passed the ruins of the temple. Rabbi Yeshua said, "Woe unto us," right? They lived through it. Woe unto us, the place where Israel's sins are forgiven is now destroyed, right? Because in the temple, you bring offerings and your sins are forgiven. And that's destroyed. Worry not, my son, said Rabbi Yochanan. There's a similar source of forgiveness, and those are acts of kindness. Those are acts of kindness. So the mitzvahs that are about acts of kindness, taking care of others, is deeply related to the temple service, inasmuch as they act as the sacrificial service in the temple. So we need to understand why. Why is it that kindness, specifically tzedakah, is considered an equivalent to the temple service? What about other important mitzvahs? The love of God. How about our Torah study that we're doing now? Honoring one's parents. There's many mitzvahs that are essential. Why aren't they considered like the temple service? And what is even more troubling, as we see in the Torah, that what seems to be the real substitute for the temple service today is prayer. Actually, prayer seems to be the much more natural replacement for the temple service more than anything else. Why? Well, because what was the purpose of the temple service? Was to develop our relationship with God. That's what the sacrifices were. And that's what prayer is, developing our relationship with God. Both of them, engage the animal soul. One is an animal soul in an animal that you bring as a sacrifice. One's the animal inside of me that I'm bringing it to love God too, with all of your heart. Right? So they are very similar, prayer and sacrifices. And we actually see in the Talmud that prayer is parallel to the temple service and therefore is actual replacement for the temple service. As the Talmud tells us in Tractate of Brachos, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said that the prayers were instituted based on the daily offering sacrifice in the Holy Temple. It was taught in a brayso in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Why may the morning's prayer be recited until noon? Because the daily morning offering may be sacrificed until noon, because it's its replacement. So just like the sacrifice can be brought to noon, so likewise the morning prayers can be till noon. And why may the afternoon service be recited until the evening? Because the daily afternoon offering is sacrificed until the evening. Similar. And why did we say the evening prayers is not fixed? Because the burning of the limbs and the fats of the offerings were not consumed by the fire on the altar, did not occur until evening. They remain on the altar and were offered continuously throughout the entire night. So we have the evening service. That's the leftover of the offerings that they are consumed on the altar overnight as evening prayers. And therefore, it's not fixed in the same manner. And why did the rabbi say the additional prayer may be recited all day, musaf? Because the additional offering is brought throughout the entire day. What do we see over here very clearly? That prayer is the real substitute for the temple service. So if that's the case, then why do Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, don't worry? He told Rabbi Yeshua when they both see the ruins of the Holy Temple, don't worry, we have something that is the replacement, and that's the acts of kindness that serve as a substitute. So how do we understand that when, again, prayer seems to be very in sync with the sacrifices, with the service in the Holy Temple, and seems to be its natural replacement? So the Ramban, Nachmanides, not Maimonides, Nachmanides, he lived a century after Maimonides, after the Rambam. He gives a very interesting concept about the sacrifices, that the main thrust of it was really about the animal offering from within. Right? What makes us sin? What makes us do wrong? Because we have an animal soul within us that has its own agenda, that doesn't want to follow instinctually the will of God. And really, that animal that led me, the Ramban says, really the punishment should be incurred by the individual. But God, in his great compassion, allows us to replace ourselves, the animal from within, right, which includes, of course, everything of me, because it's all bound together as one person, and to replace it with a physical animal. And therefore, this is what the sinner needs to think about when they're bringing their offering. It should be me on the altar. But God, in his great compassion, allows me to bring this animal in my stead. And therefore, I can achieve atonement through this offering. And this is what the Ramban says. Human function is executed through the vehicles of thought, speech, and action. As such, God commanded that when a person sins and brings an offering, they should lay their hands upon the animal, mirroring the evil action. then they verbally confess, mirroring the medieval action. Right? You did it through action, you did it through speech. Now you're mirroring it. The animal's innards and the kidneys are burned on in the fire, mirroring those limbs of the human body that are known to be the instruments of thought and the desire of the human being. The animal's legs are burned, mirroring the sinner's hands and feet that did all the work. The animal's blood is then sprinkled onto the altar, which is analogous to the blood in the sinner's body. All of these acts are performed so that the person should realize that they have sinned against God with body and soul. Really, it should have been their blood being getting spilled and their body burned, were it not for the loving kindness of the Creator, who took a substitute and a ransom, namely this offering. The animal's blood is in the place of the sinner's blood, its life in the place of the sinner's life, and the chief limbs of the offering in place of the chief parts of the sinner's body. These are worthy words that appeal to the heart, as do the words of the Gada. So what is the Ramban saying? This is the mindfulness that we need to have, right? The meditative, introspective experience that we go through when you're bringing your offering. And that very much correlates with prayer, because prayer is a meditative contemplation about our connection, our relationship with God, right? However, what's lacking in the prayer that you have in the offering? Prayer is completely spiritual. Yes, you verbalize your prayers, true, but yet it's really something more of the heart, it's more of the mind, it's more of the contemplation, the deep meditation, but it doesn't incorporate the physical person, right? Where, on the other hand, the offering in the temple, bringing an animal on the altar, is very much a physical act. So now let's think about that for a moment. What could better represent that physical action of the animal going on the altar rather than prayer? Anybody? Any thoughts? How about tzedakah, charity?
I sacrifice my money.
Why? Because money is physical, first of all, right? It's physical. You're giving physical money.
Do we not say blood? We say Blutgeld, the money we gave to the children. We say Blutgeld because when I give the children my money, I give time for my life. You work for money, and this money represents my blood, my life, and this.
Right. Very good. In other words, first of all, there's physical. The money that you're giving is physical, and secondly, is that you had to work very hard to make that money, right? So you had to give you gave of your physical being. In other words, it wasn't a spiritual experience that and making money. Making money, especially back in the day, if you're a farmer tilling the soil, and right, we're talking about leaving the corners of your fields and whatnot, there was physical labor involved. Okay, today maybe there's less physical labor, but as the Alter Rebbe, if you recall, in chapter 37, not that many chapters ago from our learning, we learned this idea of that tzedakah is giving more of my physicality than anything else, of giving of my animal soul more than anything else, as the Alter Rebbe explains here in this reading from chapter 37. The mitzvah of tzedakah is given disproportionate importance in all of Jewish literature, with such statements as it is equivalent to all of the mitzvahs, as it says in the Talmud. To wit, the Jerusalem Talmud uses the term mitzvah without any qualifier as a reference to tzedakah, as was the common practice then. This is because tzedakah is considered to be the most important practical mitzvah. Why is this so? The purpose of every mitzvah is to transform the person and carry over his or her very life to God. Now, there isn't a mitzvah in which a person's life and energy is more invested than the mitzvah of tzedakah. Think about it. With any other mitzvah, only a single part of the person is invested in the action, right? Like you're putting on tefillin, only your arm is involved in it, right? By contrast, the person invests their entire being into the money they earn. So when they go ahead and give it away to tzedakah, their entire being is invested in the mitzvah. They had to work hard for it. Now they're giving it away for tzedakah, a part of it. But what about someone who doesn't enjoy their work? How can we argue that they're completely invested in that money? With the money, so he explains, with the money, they could have bought anything for their own personal use. So by giving it away, they indeed are giving their very life away to God. Thus our sages stated that tzedakah hastens the redemption. For one donation sublimates so much of the donor's energy and life, something that would have been impossible even after many other mitzvahs. That's how unique it is, right? The entire being is involved in making the money, right? You work blood, sweat, and tears, as the saying goes, right? Even if it wasn't physical labor so much, right? But the mental labor, the engagement of the person, right? The entire engagement of the individual. And now, and furthermore, not only entire engagement, but now the money that you've earned, you could use it for your physical well-being or improvement, enhancement, or just whatever pleasure, right? So now with this, we can understand why this, the acts of loving kindness of tzedakah, truly embodies what it means, the temple service, and why it's the true stand-in. Right? We can understand now why this is now sandwiched in between all of the offerings that you should leave for the poor their due. Right? As the Rebbe explains in this week's Sikha, the comparison of gifts to the poor, to offering sacrifice is obvious. When a person offers a sacrifice, they're giving something of themselves to God. The same thing occurs when donating gifts to the poor. The donor gives away their possessions to another person by God's command. And as we mentioned, not only they're giving away their possession, right, but they had to work hard in order to make it. Okay, is that clear? So now we can understand the clear correlation that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, that we don't have sacrifices today, but into replacing them is the tzedakah that we give, the charity that we give, that charity we worked hard for. It could buy life for me, and now I'm giving life to another. And the sacrifice is I'm sacrificing something of me. That's the idea of the sacrifice. That's why the Ramban says you have to think of yourself as if you're the sacrifice, because you're giving something of yourself to Hashem. What are you giving? Your animal soul. What? Who wants this money? Who wants it for just themselves? The animal soul. You're sacrificing that and giving it to another. And that's what you're doing. You're sacrificing the animal soul on the altar of God. Therefore, it's a very perfect stand-in. Clear? Any questions on this? Just on this, not to add or to segue. I don't want to segue. I just want to make sure there's clarity on this. Okay, we're all good?
Yeah, so far.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I thought since God has given us everything, we're not really giving away ours. It wasn't ours to begin with. So what are we really sacrificing? I mean, if you truly believe that God has given us everything, we're not really sacrificing anything because we're giving God back what he gave us.
That's already a level of understanding and appreciation, right? But take it before you get there, right? Think about what it is. You worked hard for it, blood, sweat, and tears. It's yours. It's important to you. It can buy for you enhanced life, right? The fact that is a fact, right? Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's a fact, now you're giving that away. So it's this is a fact of what has occurred over here, right? You don't have another mitzvah like that. You don't have another mitzvah that you didn't work so hard for the tefillin. You didn't work so hard for other, maybe internally you have to work hard, but I'm talking intrinsic to the mitzvah, right? Tzedakah, intrinsic to the mitzvah, is money that you worked and you earned, or even if you won a lottery and you have this money that you could use for your material or spiritual well-being, for your personal well-being. And here you're giving that away. So it's not about that you gave away something that belongs to Hashem. That's not the point over here. The point is, and the point is that it is something you worked hard for, right? So in other words, your energy, think about it, this is the point over here. And this is why the mitzvah tzedakah is so big, because the energy that goes in the giving of tzedakah is huge. That energy now is being transformed and being connected to God, and is making divine all of that energy. What was that energy? The work to make the money, the potential of that money that it could have been used for yourself, and now you've transformed it and using it for a mitzvah to help another, right? We don't have another mitzvah like that, right? You don't have another mitzvah like that. Shema, say the Shema. How much did you have to, you're saying something. Did you work to make that, say the Shema? No, you just, okay, you may have to be aware, you have to be paying attention, you have to be, focused and mindful and so on. That's true, but how much energy went into that? Now, each person, you could put a lot of energy. You could say the Shema and sit there for 5 minutes and putting a lot of meditative energy into it. But that's not intrinsic to the mitzvah. That's you in the mitzvah, right? Intrinsic in the mitzvah of tzedakah is money that could be used, right? It's your money in the end. It's your money and can be used for your own needs or your own desires. So intrinsic in that is that now you're using it for someone else's needs. This is it's a very powerful idea. Is that clear? Yeah, good. Yahuva?
I have a question.
Well, 1 second. Yahuva had a hand up.
What about your time? Is that on equal par? Because, we could be spending it on the beach or just, in our garden, but our time visiting, helping another family, that kind of stuff.
So, excellent question. So there's a mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael. There's a mitzvah of visiting the sick. There's a mitzvah of going to a mourner's home, right? Those are all different mitzvahs that a person has that Ein Lehem Shir, there's no real measure to it. Right? How often can you go to the mourner's home? How often can you go and visit the sick? And so on and so forth. So yes, absolutely, there are those mitzvahs that we have to fulfill, but it's not like money. It's not like money. Let's be very frank. For most people, time we waste. Money, if I waste it on me, I'm okay with that. Right? If I wasted time, We don't worry about that. So it's an intangible. Money is a tangible. So we are much more wrapped up in it. And we earned time we don't earn. It's a gift. So it's about just using your time. Remember what the focus is over here. We're just explaining the uniqueness of tzedakah on how it is really what's the word? Represents the ultimate in the mitzvah, because it is the ultimate of the engagement of you. Right? Time is a gift, so you didn't create it. Your money you made. You made your money. You didn't make your time, right? Time we also waste. Money we don't waste. I mean, well, on ourselves we'll waste it, generally speaking. I hope, but you're right. There is that. There is the mitzvah of giving your time in obviously Israel. Michael.
When with money we can buy always something physical. Mostly before modern stuff like movies or internet, we only buy physical pleasures, food or drink. All what we can buy is physical, and for our animal, our animal soul. And then is on the opposite is then to give this away, fighting against the animal soul.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's. I got to move on because I realize time is marching. We still got a lot to do here. Okay, now that we have the correlation between charity and sacrifices, so there's a unique sacrifice that was brought in the Holy Temple. It's called Korban HaEitzim, the wood sacrifice. Rambam explains. We learned this also. What was the day of the wood sacrifice? Certain families had a fixed time at which they would go out in the forest and bring wood for a pile on the altar. On the day designated for each particular family to bring their wood sacrifice, we would also bring voluntary burnt animal sacrifices. This occasion was called the Day of the Wood Sacrifice. And it was celebrated as a festival for the family bringing the wood. On that day, the family was forbidden to deliver mournful eulogies for the deceased or fast. And they were not allowed to perform work on this day. This was the custom. Even a private individual that donated wood or logs for a pile on the altar was forbidden to deliver mournful eulogies for the deceased or fast. And they were also not allowed to perform work on this day. This was the custom. Now, what was so great about this? Why was this such a great esteem and great holiday to be celebrated? And this doesn't apply to any of the other offerings, just here. So the Alter Rebbe and the Medrash, they explain as follows. What's unique about this and why it was so celebrated? Because when you bring your offering, even though maybe you're bringing it first in a sense of humility, but even, you're bringing a sin offering. So there's a humility involved, remorse, and so on. But at a certain point, there's a certain honor that comes with it. You're bringing an offering. And there can be a sense of a adulation, a sense of where the ego kicks in and you can feel special. You're bringing an offering, even if it was a sin offering. There was that mistake that could happen. Your ego could get the best of it, even though the whole point of it was no, as the Ramban we learned earlier. But yet, it's sort of, as they say, to see and to be seen. You're coming to the Holy Temple and you're bringing your offering, It's like, just think about it for a moment. Imagine you're standing and you're with your checkbook ready to write, a nice check to Chabad, and you're standing in line with other people, and each one, at one point, you're gonna feel, here I'm in line. I'm gonna give. I'm giving something. I'm giving an offering to God Almighty, and there can be a sense of a feeling, smug about yourself, right? And that's why this sacrifice called the Korban Eitzim, the sacrifice of the wood, was brought with a unique joy. And this is what the Rebbe explains. He says as follows. The actual wood donated to the temple was not a sacrifice. Rather, it was a necessary element for the fire that burned on the altar, which in turn consumed the sacrifices. The actual sacrifices that burned on the wood were not the property of the wood donor. Rather, they were the property of the entire Jewish people, right? Because remember, everybody gave the half a shekel, that for the public offerings, everybody had a portion in every public offering. So here they brought wood, but the offering itself belongs to the entire Jewish people. There's an even greater observation to point out. This donation was performed with great joy, so much so that on that day, each family donated. They considered it to be a holiday. So bringing the wood offering was not a splashy event. It wasn't like you're standing in line, I'm here with my checkbook, I'm giving a big donation. In a sense, bringing your offering in the Holy Temple, that you're there, you're, bringing an offering, there's a sense that can develop, right? That easily will develop, that it is, you're being seen by others. It's splashy, right? So it could incorporate one's ego in giving. Not so with this offering of the wood, because it itself was only there to serve the others who would bring the offering. Right? It is, in a sense, an egoless giving. There's nothing here to do it for, except that others can now perform their mitzvah. This is the egoless giving, is the greatest level of sacrifice. The previous Rebbe says, my grandfather Tzemach Tzedek asked, what is the purpose of Hasidis? Now, my great-grandfather didn't ask, what is Hasidis? For that, he obviously knew. He knew that Hasidis is godly wisdom, that is the inner workings of Torah. Rather, the question is, what is the purpose of Hasidis? The Alter Rebbe answered. The entire purpose of Hasidis is to change a person's character. A person's first order of work is with the I, and to make an honest assessment of who they are and what they are. Who am I? The correct answer is a godly soul, a share of God, a piece of God himself. I am literally godliness. Thereafter, a person must know who exactly this I is. One ought to really break that I, namely, those matters that the ego is consumed with and what the ego wants. That this particular program of introspection is akin to plowing. It burrows into the heart and breaks through the stone-like coldness of the heart. It creates a possibility to thereafter plant a seed of work, so that the person is finally able to plant good and healthy seeds. So what is the point of Hasidus? Is to take the I of me and to recognize that there really what I am is nothing else but godliness. I'm a godly soul. I'm a part of God. That's who I am. So vis-a-vis the offerings, right? So there's offerings that, yes, the reason is to come close to God, but in the coming close to God, sometimes there can be an ego attached to it. I'm coming close to God. Look at me. I'm here in the holy temple. I'm in the forefront. I'm bringing this offering. And especially if you had a nice offering that you were bringing, there's a sense of the I there, because I'm in the forefront of the giving, right? Just think of it, you're just there with the animal and you're bringing. There's a sense of self-satisfaction, right? Naturally. But you didn't have that with the Korban Eitzim. With the offering of the wood, that was only something that was a means to allow others to bring their sacrifice, right? So there's no ego there, because I'm only an enabler for someone else to do their mitzvah. I'm not doing, and not only that, it's in the background. It's not like, oh, I'm carrying all the wood and I'm coming in and everybody's seeing that, look, our family, we're an amazing family, look at us, There's none of that, because it was stockpiled in the Lishkas Eitzim, in the place where the wood goes. There's no sense of coming to see and to be seen, right? It was all still a hate quiet. So there was no ego involved. Is that clear? Good. So now we're better equipped to revisit our question that we had earlier. We asked, why is kindness in particular chosen as a substitute for sacrifices, as opposed to prayer, which seems to be a more natural replacement? So we explained that there's something unique about acts of loving kindness, of tzedakah, right, in particular, is because of the materiality that's involved in there, right? But let us go even further now. Let's begin with kindness. What exactly does that mean? So the original Hebrew term is called Gemilas Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. Doesn't have a more specific or limited or legal definition. Halachic terms, the Rambam says, the greatest level, higher than all of the rest, is to fortify a fellow Jew and give them a gift or a loan, form a partnership with him, or find work for him until he is strong enough so that he does not need to ask others for sustenance. Of this it is said, if your kinsman, being in straits, comes under your authority, and you hold him as though a resident alien, let him live by your side. That is as if to say, hold him up so that he will not fall and be in need. So the ultimate in charity is to allow the other person to be independent, as opposed to being in need of assistance. There are people who like to give because they feel they're the giver and the recipient. And in a certain way, they're comfortable in that position that this person should be the recipient. Because them being the recipient, they're the giver, they feel like, I can feel good about myself that I'm giving. So it's not so much about the recipient, it's more about me and me feeling good about myself that I'm the giver. But when you give in the highest form, is to give a person in a way that they can stand on their own 2 feet, whether it's being a partner with them in business, whether it's starting them in business, whether it's giving them a loan, right? Or whatever it is, right? So in that sense, There's it's truly about the other and not about you. Is that clear? Let's take it even a bit deeper than that. The Midrash says that King David said to God, Master of the universe, let the world sit before you, and you ought to even things out. Right? He was, he was definitely, seems like he was a Democrat over here. Level the rich and the poor. God replied, if I were to do that, how would people ever know goodness and kindness? If all are equally rich and poor, who would be able to do kindness? So listen to this infinite wisdom of God. God designs the world where you have the haves and the have-nots purposefully. Why? He could make it an equal playing field, but he chooses not to, because that creates the possibility of people being kind, where we can emulate God and support another through acts of loving kindness. Charity and the like make a person more godly. So while there may be an immediate need for charity, meaning enabling the poor, helping those that need, right? The ultimate core reason is not that, because God could have done that. God doesn't need you. He could have done that. But God wants to cultivate in us loving kindness, that we should be a giver with loving kindness, that we should be like God in being kind. But what kind of kindness should it be? Not about me. It's not about me feeling good about myself. Because then the kindness is only a means for me feeling fulfilled and feeling, that will make us perhaps even more self-centered. And hard to get beyond that self-centeredness. Why? Because after all, you did a mitzvah. And, and you got this fuzzy feeling inside of you. Not to say that that you don't have the feeling, but what's the motivation? Because of course, better that the recipient receives with your motivation of being, feeling good about yourself, rather than the recipient doesn't receive. That's for sure better. But that's not what Gemilas Chasadim means. It means to give like God gives, to be godly through our giving. That it's about the other and what they need to help them stand on 2 feet. So it's not like, okay, poor man knocks on the door. He says, "Sir, please help me with a sandwich, something." He says, "No, I'm sorry. I'd love to help you. I see you're really in need, but I got to go save all the walruses of the world, and I've got my placards over here, and I'm going out to protest." Why is he doing that? Why are you doing that? What are you trying to save the world? And nothing about the world. It's all about an ego. What's the proof? What are you giving of yourself? Where's your money going? Are you giving all of that up? Or are you is this a way to make yourself a quick buck, maybe even? For some people it is. Now, I'm sure there are some people that are no doubt. But in the giving to be godly, just as God doesn't do it out of ego, so likewise, we don't do it in that manner. Right? This now we can understand more precisely why the Torah in our portion that's speaking about offerings, offering to God, that it has there about the payah, the corners of the field, the leket, the sheaves, and the shicha, what was forgotten, that why that is sandwiched in between the offerings, as the Rebbe explains. Common denominator between the three mitzvahs of leket, shicha, and peya is that not only in the sense that the donor gives away a personal item, rather the donation is quite perfect, for the donor has absolutely no personal gain from it. He or she is not allowed to choose to whom the donation will go. Whoever wants to come and take. It's not like you're sitting there, oh, here, take. Leave it there and let them take it themselves. Don't be there like you're the goody good guy, so you could feel good about your giving. It's there that they can take, and you can't even choose who it goes to. That's true giving. So that's the common denominator of why they are precisely in the Parsha, to show us that that is the kind of giving. Now with this, then the Rebbe explains that in Rashi's commentary, remember he brought down that from Davina, same Ravashi, that he actually, what are you doing? It's akin to building the temple, so Rebbe explains it. You can now understand the precision of language of the metaphor, akin to building the temple, as opposed to akin to the temple service. It said by doing acts of loving kindness, right, of tzedakah, it's akin to building the temple as opposed to the temple service, Rashi says. Constructing a temple is hard work, and it's a benefit had by all Jews, as opposed to someone who offers their own personal sacrifice inside the temple, a matter of personal gain. Wow. And now the Rebbe makes a distinction. Remember, we said prayer versus, right? We have two things that are akin to the temple. Now the Rebbe is making a distinction. When it comes to prayer, that's your personal connection with God. That replaces the personal sacrifices that were brought in the Holy Temple, about you getting closer to God. So that's a personal gain. You're closest to God, right? But that's not the language that Rashi is using when he speaks about tzedakah, right? About these three things that are sandwiched in between. He says about building the temple. Building the temple is hard work. Like tzedakah, you work hard for your money. And in the end, who gains from it? It's for everybody. It's not about you. Not like the sacrifice that you're bringing and you're there, you're in the Holy Temple, you're going to get atonement, there's a whole. No, it's not about you. You're just the vehicle that through you can help another. That is true kindness. Which Andrew now answers a question that you asked earlier, that this is even a higher level. It's not just the money belongs to God and you're doing what God wants, right? No, it's much more than that now. You're just the vehicle that through you're doing good, for God's sake. You're doing good. In other words, you're shying away from the glamour. Now, sometimes, by the way, like I know when people give me a donation, sometimes like I say to them, I want people should know about this donation. And I say, why? Because people will see and they'll learn from that they, to give. So sometimes, on the contrary, and for some people, that's sacrifice. Some people, okay, great. Yeah, sure. My name in bright lights. I'm happy, right? For others, that's a sacrifice. Yeah, I don't want that. I don't need that. And that's all, I want it. I'm here just to help build. I'm not here to get accolades and to feel good from it. And that's my motivation. So I don't want that to be. I want it to be a true service of God, true building his home. That's what I want it to end up being. So that person, so I tell them, okay, but we need your name there because we want other people to learn from this. Okay. Now, the beautiful thing over here is, this is obviously a much more profound level of giving. The bottom line in giving is, the bottom line is in the act of giving, there's a mitzvah because you've done a mitzvah, period. And, the recipient received, and therefore there's a mitzvah, period. The more high-minded way is the way we're speaking over here, but it doesn't take away. And often, listen, here at any Chabad house, or for that matter, any synagogue or any, Jewish institution, we survive, of course, on donations. And the person that needs the glamour, it's okay. It's okay. That's where they're at. And as we said, better that they give that manner than not giving, or not giving us enthusiastically, and so on. So there is, it's okay because you're in the end, you are building the institution, you are building someone's life through this. So therefore, that's okay. At the same time, as we learned earlier, God could have made the playing field equal, but he wants us to learn to be giving. But to truly be giving means it's about the recipient and it's not about me. And of course, that's a real sacrifice at times. Because think about it. What do you mean it's not about me? But in the world that we live in, again, going back to what we spoke in the beginning about, social media, social media by definition is what? Hey, look at me. That's what social media is. Hey, look at me, right? That's by definition what it is. Or voyeurism. Oh, hey, I'm looking at someone else, right? I am living through someone else's life and seeing what they're doing with their life, right? And being entertained by that. But it's all about looking into my life or someone else's life, and so on and so forth. So the me generation, of course, and seeking the fame that comes with it. But then we learn in this Parsha that there's a much more profound way. Yes, give, no matter what. But if we can recognize and rise to the occasion of what it means, yeah. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Beautiful thoughts from this week's Parsha. You're all quiet.
That was a good teaching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi, wasn't there a story or a midrash about some poor guy or some guy in the town? He was like, nobody liked the guy or something, and he was nasty with everybody, but at the end, he turned out to be the one that was taking care of everybody.
Yes. Famous story. I'll tell it another time. Actually, I have a story that goes together with that story. Remind me. A modern day story that is connected with that story. And with the Rebbe, a pretty amazing story. Yeah. All right, folks. So many of you I'm going to see soon.
And what time is it?
25 minutes.
25.
All right, folks. Good to vach.
Shavua tov.
You have what to ponder.
Yes.
God bless you all. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
See you
Bye.
later. Bye.
Bye-bye.